Amelia Vance loved Graceland. Not just the glittering famous Graceland the tourists flocked to with its jungle room and hall of gold records. She loved the quiet, hidden Graceland, the one behind the velvet ropes in the meticulously catalogued archives. As a junior archivist, she spent her days among the countless artifacts of Elvis Presley's life, his stage outfits, handwritten lyrics, personal letters, and thousands of photographs. Each item was a tiny window into the king's world, and Amelia felt a profound connection to the man behind the legend. Most days, her work was methodical, almost meditative. She'd carefully handle fragile documents, update digital inventories, and help researchers find what they needed. But today was different. Today, her supervisor, Mr. Davies, a man whose stern exterior hid a surprising fondness for Amelia's youthful enthusiasm, had given her a peculiar task. "Amelia," he'd said, peering over his spectacles, "we've cleared out a section of the old storage room, the one behind the original guest house, been untouched for decades, probably nothing but old furniture and forgotten boxes. But check it out, will you? You have a knack for finding the interesting amidst the mundane." The old storage room was a maze of shadows and forgotten things. Dust motes danced in the single beam of sunlight that sliced through a high window. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and neglect. Amelia pulled on a pair of white gloves, adjusted her respirator mask, and began to navigate the stacks of crates and shrouded furniture. It was a tedious job, mostly confirming empty boxes or identifying broken relics for disposal hours past. Her back ached and a fine layer of dust clung to her clothes. Just as she was about to call it a day, tucked away in a dark corner, beneath a stack of old draperies, she spotted it, a small, unassuming wooden box. It wasn't ornate or grand, just a simple, unvarnished pine box, perhaps a foot long, 6 inches wide, and equally deep. It looked like a child's treasure chest, worn smooth by time, with a small, tarnished brass latch. Curiosity piqued. Amelia gently unlapped it. Inside, nestled amongst layers of brittle yellowed tissue paper, were a few items. A small, leather-bound journal, its cover soft with age, a silver locket slightly tarnished but gleaming faintly, and what caught her eye immediately, a folded piece of paper, thicker than regular stationery, with a faint, almost imperceptible watermark of a lion's head. She carefully lifted the paper, her heart giving an excited thump. It felt important somehow. Unfolding it, she saw a list, not a shopping list, or a to-do list, but a list of names. Written in Elvis's distinctive, bold handwriting, some names were familiar: Mama, Gladys, Vernon, Priscilla, Lisa, Marie. These were expected, beloved family members. But then, things got interesting. Below the family names, the list continued with an almost reverent spacing between each entry. Mrs. Gable, Elijah Jones, Maria Sanchez, William, Billy Thompson, Reverend Elijah Maxwell. No famous musicians, no movie stars, no well-known figures from his entourage. This sounded ordinary. Yet the way they were written, with the same care as his family's names, suggested a deep significance. Next to each name, a small hand-drawn cross symbol was neatly placed. She turned the paper over. On the back, in smaller, more hurried script, were a few lines. "Lord, hear my prayers for these souls. Guide them, protect them, grant them peace and strength. Let them know they are not alone. Amen." A prayer list. This was a list of people Elvis prayed for. The implications were immense. Why these specific, seemingly anonymous individuals? And why was it hidden away in a forgotten box, alongside a personal journal and locket tucked away, as if it were a secret too precious to reveal Amelia's mind? Race, this wasn't just a list. It was a window into a private spiritual side of Elvis that the public rarely, if ever, saw. Kind of person who would keep a prayer list hidden away for people unknown to the world. It spoke of a quiet, profound generosity of spirit. Her gaze fell back on the first unfamiliar name. Mrs. Gable. It was so plain, so unassuming. Who was Mrs. Gable? Was she a fan? A housekeeper? A childhood friend? Amelia's curiosity, which was always high when it came to Elvis, surged into a powerful wave of determination. She had to find out. She had to understand why these names, these seemingly ordinary people, had held such a special place in the heart of the king. Carefully, reverently, she refolded the list, placing it back in the box with the journal. And lock it. She'd bring the whole box to Mr. Davies. But she knew deep down that this wasn't just another archival find. This was something extraordinary, something that could redefine the legacy of Elvis Presley. And Amelia Vance, the quiet archivist, felt a thrilling sense of purpose stirring within her. The next morning, Amelia approached Mr. Davies' office with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She cradled the small wooden box carefully. Mr. Davies was a man of logic and procedure, and while he appreciated historical finds, he could also be dismissive of anything he deemed speculative. "Ah, Amelia, find anything interesting in that dust trap?" he asked, not looking up from his computer. "Mr. Davies, I think so. I found this," she said gently, placing the box on his desk. He finally looked up, raising an eyebrow at the plain pine box. Amelia opened it, revealing the journal locket and the folded paper. "It's a personal prayer list, I believe, written by Elvis." Mr. Davies picked up the list, his expression unreadable. He unfolded it slowly, scanning the names. "Mama? Gladys Vernon? Yes, those are expected, but these others..." He trailed off, his brow furrowing. "Mrs. Gable? Elijah Jones? Who are these people?" "That's what I'd like to find out, sir," Amelia replied, her voice firm. "They don't seem to be public figures or part of his known inner circle, but the way they're written with the crosses next to them suggests a deep significance." Mr. Davies hummed a non-committal sound. "Could be anyone. Amelia, old acquaintances, people he met briefly. He was a generous man, always giving money away. Perhaps they were just names he collected from charity events. People who wrote to him." He sounded skeptical already, trying to rationalize it away. "But a prayer list, sir," Amelia pressed. "It's different from a financial ledger. It suggests a personal, spiritual connection, and it was hidden, tucked away. Why?" Mr. Davies put the list back in the box. "Look, Amelia, it's an interesting curiosity. Nothing more. We have thousands of documents. This could be a private eccentricity. Don't go chasing ghosts. Focus on the new exhibit. We have a deadline." In the grand scheme of the Graceland archives, a list of unknown names might seem insignificant. But something in her gut told her it wasn't. There was an honesty, a raw vulnerability in that hidden list that spoke volumes about Elvis the man, not Elvis the star. "Yes, Mr. Davies," she said, trying to keep her voice even. "I understand." She picked up the box, a silent promise to herself forming in her mind. She would pursue this even if it meant doing it on her own time. Back at her desk, she carefully digitized the prayer list. The names blurred into a digital file, but for Amelia, they stood out like beacons. She started with Mrs. Gable, the first unfamiliar name. Quick search of Graceland's official records, employee lists, and fan mail logs yielded nothing. No Mrs. Gable associated with Elvis in any official capacity. She then tried public database, old phone books, newspaper archives from the Memphis area. The name Mrs. Gable was common enough. A frustratingly generic lead. Hours of searching turned up dozens of Mrs. Gables, none with any obvious connection to Elvis Presley. Just as frustration began to set in, she noticed something. On the original paper list, tucked almost invisibly into the small space between Mrs. Gable and the next name, Elijah Jones, was tiny, almost microscopic symbol. It looked like a stylized rose, or perhaps a small thorny branch. It was so faint she almost missed it. Amelia zoomed in on the high-resolution scan of the list. Yes, definitely. A tiny rose. It was an odd detail. Why would it be there? She went back to her search, adding rose or garden to Mrs. Gable and her queries. Still, nothing definitive. Then she remembered something from an obscure biography she'd read years ago about Elvis's early days before fame truly hit. It mentioned his love for driving around Memphis, late at night, sometimes stopping at random diners or quiet neighborhoods. One passage briefly noted a period when he was particularly drawn to a specific old-fashioned neighborhood known for its small, well-tended gardens, particularly rose bushes. It was a long shot, a whisper of a lead. But Amelia felt a spark. She cross-referenced old Memphis city maps with known addresses of people associated with Elvis in his early years, hoping to pinpoint that specific neighborhood. She found a cluster of streets in an older part of town, far from the lavish estates of later years. One of those streets, Elmwood Avenue, was notorious for its prize-winning rose gardens in the 1950s. She searched for Mrs. Gable on Elmwood Avenue, and there it was. An old property record from 1957 showing a Eleanor Gable residing at 142 Elmwood Ave. The name and address were tied to no major events, no scandals, just the quiet life of an ordinary citizen. But the address was within that specific area, and the rose symbol was too much of a coincidence for Amelia to ignore. She knew she couldn't use official Graceland resources for this. This was her personal quest. Now she decided to drive there after work. It was a long shot, maybe a foolish one, but the tiny rose in the margin of Elvis's secret prayer list was calling to her. She had to know. Who was Mrs. Eleanor Gable? And why was she on Elvis Presley's most private and sacred list? The old neighborhood Elmwood Avenue was a world away from the manicured lawns and towering gates of Graceland. It was a place where time seemed to slow down, where mature trees lined the streets, their branches intertwining to form a leafy canopy. Houses, mostly brick bungalows and two-story Victorians, stood close together, each with its own character, many adorned with the very rose bushes Amelia had read about. Amelia parked her sensible sedan down the street from 142 Elmwood Avenue. The house was a modest, well-kept bungalow, painted a soft sage green, a small porch swing hung by the front door, and, true to her research, a meticulously tended rose garden bloomed in the front yard. Pink, red, and yellow roses burst forth in a riot of color, their petals still dewy from a recent watering. Her heart hammered a little. This felt less like archival research and more like a detective novel. She took a deep breath mentally, rehearsing what she might say. "Hello, I'm from Graceland, and I found your name on Elvis Presley's personal prayer list." It sounded absurd. She decided to simplify it. "Hello, I'm doing some historical research, and I believe you might have known Elvis Presley." She walked up the small stone path, the scent of roses filling the air. She lifted the brass knocker and let it fall, the sound echoing softly in the quiet afternoon. After a moment, the front door creaked open, revealing an elderly woman with kind, crinkled eyes and silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a simple floral dress and a comforting, almost sweet smile. "Can I help you, dear?" the woman asked, her voice soft and slightly raspy with age. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Amelia began, trying to sound as professional and non-threatening as possible. "My name is Amelia Vance. I work as an archivist at Graceland. I'm doing some research on Elvis Presley's personal effects, and I found a list of names." "Your name, Mrs. Gable?" The woman's eyes widened almost imperceptibly, and her smile faltered just a touch. "Eleanor Gable? Yes, that's me," she said, her gaze fixed on Amelia, searching. "Elvis, you say my name was on a list of his?" "Yes, ma'am," Amelia confirmed, taking a small, carefully printed copy of the relevant section of the list from her purse, making sure not to show the full document. With a small cross next to it, it appears to be a prayer list. Mrs. Gable's eyes welled up, and she pressed a hand to her chest. "Prayer list," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Oh, bless his heart, he never forgot." She stepped back, opening the door wider. "Please, come in, child. Come in." Amelia stepped into a cozy living room, filled with old-fashioned furniture, faded photographs, and the comforting scent of lavender, and old books. A vase of freshly cut roses sat on a small side table. Mrs. Gable gestured to a worn armchair. "I haven't thought about him in that way in so long," Mrs. Gable said, settling into a rocking chair opposite Amelia. "The world knows him for his music, his fame, his flash. But he was more than that, so much more." "You knew him?" Amelia asked gently, her voice barely a whisper, afraid to break the spell. Mrs. Gable nodded, her gaze drifting to a framed photograph on the mantelpiece, a faded picture of a young man in a military uniform smiling. "Not in the way the papers knew him, not in the way the fans knew him. We only met a few times, really. But he changed my life. He truly did." She paused, taking a moment as if gathering the memories. "Arthur was so proud. He wouldn't ask for help from anyone." Amelia listened intently, captivated. This was the story she had hoped for, even beyond her expectations. "He walked right up to my fence. He said, 'Ma'am, I couldn't help but notice how beautiful your roses are.' My mother always loved roses." I just nodded, barely able to speak. "He asked if everything was all right. I fooled out my heart, told him about Arthur, the bills, losing the house. He listened, didn't interrupt, just listened. When I finished, he just said, 'Ma'am, sometimes help comes in unexpected ways. Don't give up hope. Keep those roses blooming.' The very next week, a letter arrived. An anonymous check. It was enough to pay off Arthur's medical debts, enough to save the house. It said, 'From a friend who believes in the power of roses and prayer,' and a small hand-drawn cross at the bottom, just like the one on your paper. I knew it was him. I just knew. He was already famous then, but he didn't want any credit. He just wanted to help." Amelia felt a lump in her throat. This was the Elvis no one talked about. The Elvis who quietly, anonymously saved a family from ruin, asking for nothing in return but continued prayer. The tiny rose in the margin of the prayer list, she realized, wasn't a code. It was a personal reminder, a symbol of the moment. He saw Mrs. Gable among her roses, heartbroken but still tending beauty amidst despair. He came back once, a few months later, Mrs. Gable added, "just to check in." He didn't come to the door, just drove by, waved to me as I was tending the roses. I waved back, never saw him again. After that, not in person, but I never forgot his kindness. And to think, he never forgot me, either. He never, for full of awe. Amelia felt tears sting her own eyes. The story was simple, profound, and overwhelmingly heartwarming. Mr. Davies had called it a curiosity, but this was anything but. This was the seed of something much bigger, a testament to a man whose heart was as grand as his stage presence. And Amelia knew with absolute certainty that she was just at the beginning of unveiling a hidden chapter of Elvis Presley's life. Amelia left Mrs. Gable's house with a profound sense of awe. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street, but the world felt brighter, more hopeful. The story Mrs. Gable shared was more than just a heartwarming anecdote. It was a testament to the quiet, unassuming kindness that had fueled a hidden part of Elvis's life. Mr. Davies' skepticism now seemed not just unfounded, but almost disrespectful. She drove back to Graceland, her mind replaying Mrs. Gable's words. He just wanted to help. He never forgot. It painted a picture of Elvis far removed from the headlines and the sensationalism. This was a man who saw someone in distress, felt compassion, and acted without a single thought for recognition or personal gain. The rose symbol, the anonymous check, the private visits, it all spoke of a deeply humble and empathetic soul. The next morning, back in the quiet hum of the archives, Amelia felt a renewed sense of purpose. The list wasn't just names anymore. It was a map to hidden acts of grace. She pulled up the digitized prayer list again after Mrs. Gable. The next name was Elijah Jones. The name didn't trigger any specific memories from her extensive Elvis knowledge. She followed the same investigative process. Graceland records, public database, newspaper archives, again a common name. Hundreds of Elijah Joneses. She searched for any specific details, any faint symbols next to the name on the original list. But there were none this time. She decided to broaden her search. Elvis was a global phenomenon. Could Elijah Jones be from outside Memphis? The lack of specific local markers, unlike the rose for Mrs. Gable, suggested a wider reach. She remembered reading about Elvis's tours, his travels. But how would he meet an Elijah Jones and then add him to his private prayer list? Then it hit her. The music, Elvis was first and foremost a musician. He listened to everything, absorbed every influence, blues. Perhaps an older, forgotten artist from whom Elvis drew inspiration. She began searching for Elijah Jones in musical archives, specifically blues and gospel musicians from the 1950s and 60s. After sifting through dozens of entries, one name finally stood out: Elijah, Blind Eli Jones. A blues guitarist and singer from Mississippi, known for his raw, soulful performances in juke joints and small clubs. His records were obscure, mostly released on independent labels, never reaching mainstream success. He'd lived a life on the fringes, but his talent was undeniable, praised by other musicians, though rarely by critics. Amelia found an old grainy photograph of Blind Eli. A man with a weathered face, dark glasses, and a guitar cradled in his arms. He wasn't famous, not in the way Elvis was, but his music had a legendary underground quality. He was listed as having passed away in the early 1990s. A dead end, not entirely. Elijah Jones might be gone, but his legacy, and potentially his story with Elvis, might live on through his family or fellow musicians. Amelia discovered that Blind Eli had a grandson, Marcus Jones, who was also a musician, a respected jazz guitarist in New Orleans. Marcus had, in interviews, spoken reverently of his grandfather's influence. This felt like a strong lead. New Orleans was a long way from Memphis, but Amelia was more determined than ever. She decided to use a few vacation days she had accrued. Mr. Davies would likely disapprove, but this quest was personal now. She booked a flight to New Orleans. A few days later, Amelia found herself in the vibrant, humid air of the French Quarter. She located Marcus Jones through his music label's public relations. He was known for being a private man, but Amelia was armed with a compelling reason for his time. She arranged a meeting at a quiet jazz club before his evening performance. Marcus Jones was a tall, imposing man in his late 60s, with a quiet intensity in his eyes. He listened patiently as Amelia explained her discovery, showing him the digitized prayer list. When he saw his grandfather's name, Elijah Jones, with the tiny cross next to it, his eyes softened, a faint smile touching his lips. "Blind Eli," he murmured. "My granddaddy." "So that's how it was?" Amelia asked, leaning forward, her heart thumping with anticipation. Marcus nodded slowly, looking out at the dimly lit club. "Granddaddy rarely spoke about it. Not directly. He was a proud man, but I heard whispers from my grandmother, from his old bandmates, back in the early days. Beat some maze. He heard Granddaddy play one night in a little juke joint in the North Memphis. Granddaddy was struggling. He was a genius on the guitar, but he was barely making enough to feed his family. He had a young boy, my father, who showed real musical promise, but they couldn't afford lessons." Marcus paused, picking up a cocktail napkin and meticulously folding it. Kind Granddaddy had always dreamed of, and an envelope full of cash, enough to pay for my father's first few years of music lessons. It was addressed to a true master, from an admirer of the spirit. Amelia gasped, a wave of emotion washing over her. "Granddaddy always believed it was," Marcus said, his voice husky. He never told anyone because he knew it could cause trouble for Elvis if it got out a white artist frequenting black clubs and supporting black musicians openly. He feared backlash for Elvis, Amelia whispered, understanding the immense risk Elvis took. And to think, Marcus added, his voice full of wonder, Elvis prayed for him. Amelia felt tears welling up again. Two names, two profound acts of selfless kindness hidden for decades. Elvis wasn't just giving money. He was investing in lives, in dreams, in the very fabric of American music and society, quietly defying the conventions of his time. This was a side of him few, if any, could have ever imagined. King truly had a heart of gold, a heart that beat not just for the spotlights, but for the quiet, forgotten souls he encountered along his path. The flight back to Memphis from New Orleans was a time for reflection. Amelia clutched her small notebook filled with the details of Marcus Jones's story. Each revelation deepened her understanding of Elvis, transforming him from a larger-than-life icon into a figure of profound human complexity and quiet grace. Mr. Davies's dismissive attitude now felt like a challenge, a barrier she was determined to break down, not just for herself, but for Elvis's true legacy. Back at Graceland, she immersed herself in the archives, again the prayer list now feeling like a living document. The next name on the list was Maria Sanchez. This name immediately brought a different set of challenges, Spanish surname even more common than Gable or Jones. No obvious musical or local Memphis connections jumped out. Amelia started with the usual search protocols, expanding her reach to other major American cities where Elvis had toured frequently. Los Angeles, Las Vegas, New York. She looked for connections to charities, community centers, or specific events. It was a needle in a haystack. Then she remembered something from an obscure fan magazine from the early 1970s. It contained a short, almost throwaway paragraph about Elvis making an unscheduled anonymous visit to a children's hospital in Las Vegas during one of his engagements there. The article didn't mention names, only that he spent time with the children away from the cameras. Could Maria Sanchez be connected to this? Perhaps a child he met? Or a family member of a child? Amelia refocused her search on Las Vegas, specifically looking for children's hospitals and charities active in the late 60s and early 70s. She found records for a small, privately funded clinic that specialized in treating children with rare, debilitating illnesses, the Desert Bloom Children's Clinic. It was founded in the early 1970s, around the time of that fan magazine blurb. She dug deeper into the clinic's history, poring over old annual reports and press releases. The names of donors were for the most part public. But she found one unusual entry, a significant, anonymous donation made in 1971, labeled "From a Friend of the Children." The amount was substantial enough to keep the clinic afloat during a financially difficult period. Amelia's detective instincts tingled. This felt right. She then searched for Maria Sanchez, specifically linked to the Desert Bloom Children's Clinic, either as a patient, a parent, or an employee. And there it was, a name in an old newsletter from 1972, thanking various families. The Sanchez family for their unwavering spirit during Maria's treatment. Maria was a child, a patient. She managed to track down a former administrative assistant from the clinic, now in her late 80s, living in a quiet retirement community in Nevada. Amelia explained her research, once again showing the small section of the prayer list. The mention of Maria Sanchez's name brought a gasp from the elderly woman. Mrs. Clara Peterson. Maria, oh bless her heart, she was such a brave little girl, Mrs. Peterson whispered, tears welling in her eyes. She had a rare heart condition. Doctors didn't give her much hope. Did Elvis visit the clinic? Amelia asked, her voice hushed. Mrs. Peterson nodded slowly. He'd sit by their bedsides, read to them, sing to them softly. He had this way of making them feel special, seen. And Maria? Amelia prompted. Maria was one of his favorites. Mrs. Peterson recalled a faraway look in her eyes. She was often in pain, very weak, but when Elvis came, her eyes would light up. He'd sing, Can't help falling in love to her, just her. In a whisper, he told her she had the bravest heart he'd ever known. Clinic was struggling financially at that time, Mrs. Peterson continued. It saved so many children, including Maria. What happened to Maria? Amelia asked, her voice thick with emotion. Maria survived, Mrs. Peterson said, a radiant smile breaking through her tears. Against all odds, she's a grown woman now, a grandmother herself. She lives in Arizona. She went on to become a nurse. Ironically said she wanted to give back to help others the way she was helped. She never forgot the man who sang to her, who gave her hope. Elvis wasn't just a performer. He was a silent benefactor, a source of light in the darkest corners of people's lives. He didn't just sing about love. He lived it. In the most profound and secret ways. He didn't just save a clinic. He saved a life, giving Maria the chance to live and in turn help countless others. Do you know Maria's current name or contact information? Amelia asked, her voice barely a whisper, knowing she had to hear this story from Maria herself. Mrs. Peterson, with a surprising clarity of memory, provided an old married name and a general area in Arizona. She moved there after she got married. I sent her a Christmas card for years, but we lost touch. I hope she's well. Amelia left the retirement community with a sense of wonder. The prayer list wasn't just about anonymous charity. It was about deep personal connections, forged in moments of vulnerability and hope. Elvis wasn't just a king. He was a silent guardian angel to those who needed him most. And Maria Sanchez, the unlikely prodigy of hope and resilience, was another testament to his hidden heart. The intrigue only deepened. Who else had Elvis touched in such profound and private ways? Amelia's investigation into Maria Sanchez's story yielded another profound revelation about Elvis's compassionate nature. The Las Vegas trip had been invaluable, cementing her conviction that this prayer list was far more than a mere curiosity. It was a sacred ledger of a hidden life, a testament to a man who practiced what he preached about faith and charity. Back in Memphis, Amelia was more focused than ever. She had started bringing the wooden box home with her, carefully placing it on her bedside table, feeling a quiet reverence for its contents. She felt a guardianship over these secrets, a responsibility to share them respectfully. The next name on the list was William Billy Thompson. The name was common, but Amelia felt a familiar flicker of excitement. Each name had led to a remarkable story. She started her research, and almost immediately something surfaced that caught her eye. Not in Graceland's official records, but in a local Memphis Historical Society's archives. An old newspaper clipping from the mid-1960s. A small article buried deep in the classified section. It mentioned a William Thompson, a young man arrested during a civil rights protest, accused of disturbing the peace. The article mentioned he was a student activist, advocating for desegregation. Amelia's breath hitched. Civil rights. This was a potentially explosive connection. Elvis was often criticized for not being more outwardly vocal on civil rights issues during a tumultuous era. While he was known to have black friends and musical influences, his public stance remained largely neutral, a strategic move by Colonel Parker to protect his broad appeal. Could this be another example of his quiet behind-the-scenes actions? She cross-referenced William Thompson with student activists in Memphis. She found a more detailed account of the protest and a list of those arrested. Yes, William Thompson. Then 20 years old. The charges were later dropped, but the incident effectively blacklisted him from local colleges. Amelia continued digging. She found that William Thompson, unable to continue his formal education, went on to become an unsung community organizer in South Memphis. He helped establish a small grassroots community center, The Beacon, in a historically underserved neighborhood. The center offered tutoring, job training, and a safe space for youth. It operated on a shoestring budget, relying heavily on volunteers and small donation. The Beacon Center was still active, though much expanded, and had a small dedicated staff. Amelia decided to visit. The current director, an older woman named Mrs. Evelyn Hayes, greeted her warmly. Mrs. Hayes had been involved with the Beacon since its early days. Amelia explained her research, carefully choosing her words, leading up to the William Thompson name and the prayer list. When Mrs. Hayes saw the name, her eyes widened. "Billy Thompson," she murmured, a fond smile gracing her lips. "Yes, I knew Billy very well. He was a force of nature, full of passion and integrity. He poured his heart and soul into this center. He's on Elvis Presley's personal prayer list," Amelia revealed, showing her the excerpt. Mrs. Hayes leaned back in her chair, a look of profound understanding on her face. "Ah, so that's it. It always made sense, somehow." "What do you mean, Mrs. Hayes?" Amelia pressed, hardly daring to breathe. "And he wrote to Elvis?" Amelia asked. "He did," Mrs. Hayes confirmed. "Always cash, always in a plain envelope, postmarked from different cities. No return of friend of Beacon." "Elvis was touring constantly in the 60s, Amelia mused. "That would explain the different postmarks." "Exactly," Mrs. Hayes said. "So Billy kept the secret. He never told a soul where the money came from. Just said a generous, anonymous donor. He protected Elvis," Amelia realized, overwhelmed by the quiet dignity of their secret alliance. "Yes, and Elvis protected the Beacon. He kept us alive. Without that money, this center wouldn't exist today. Think of all the lives that have been changed here, all the children who found a path. It all started with that quiet, anonymous support." Mrs. Hayes gestured around the bustling community center, now filled with children doing homework, teenagers learning computer skills, and adults attending literacy classes. Amelia imagined Elvis, a global superstar, meticulously ensuring anonymous cash donations made it to a small, struggling community center in the heart of segregated Memphis. Put his money and perhaps even his reputation on the line without asking for a single word of praise. This was true courage, true faith. "Billy Thompson passed away a few years ago," Mrs. Hayes said softly, "but he always taught us, true help isn't about recognition. It's about making a difference even in the shadows. He used to say sometimes, the most powerful light comes from hidden places." Amelia thought of the quiet man who wrote names on a list tucked away in a dusty box. The names weren't just names, they were beacons illuminating the true heart of Elvis Presley. A heart as generous and brave as any king's. The whispers in the alley, the quiet acts of a superstar, were now beginning to echo loud and clear in Amelia's understanding of his extraordinary legacy. Amelia returned to Graceland feeling a deep sense of connection to the names on the prayer list. Mrs. Gable, Elijah Jones, Maria Sanchez, William Thompson. Each story was a thread weaving a tapestry of compassion and quiet philanthropy that defied the public narrative. He wasn't just a rock and roll legend. He was a silent benefactor, a spiritual warrior, fighting battles against poverty, illness, and injustice with anonymous acts of kindness. But how did he manage to maintain such secrecy? How did he ensure these donations, these visits remained untracked and uncredited for decades? This level of deliberate anonymity suggested a sophisticated, trusted network. Amelia suspected there was a keeper of secrets involved, someone who helped Elvis execute his private missions. She went back to the old wooden box, specifically the small leather-bound journal. She hadn't delved into it much, not wanting to intrude too deeply without a clearer understanding. Now it felt like the next logical step. The journal was not a diary, not in the traditional sense. It contained mostly spiritual reflections, quotes from scripture, and song ideas. But hidden among the pages were occasional cryptic notes, dates, amounts, initials, sometimes followed by a single word like delivered or confirmed. It wasn't a ledger, but it was certainly a record. Amelia noticed a recurring set of initials, J. They appeared next to several entries that seemed to correspond with the timeline of her discoveries. For example, next to an entry detailing a large sum of money and the word clinic was J.S. confirmed. Next to another mentioning Memphis Fund and a specific date was J.S. delivered. Who was J.S.? She checked official Graceland staff lists, public records, and Elvis's inner circle from those decades. No one with the initials J.S. stood out as a major player, no prominent manager, bodyguard, or musician. Then she remembered a minor detail from an old unofficial fan biography, one known for its slightly obsessive research into the background players. It mentioned a quiet, unassuming man named Jim Stanley. Jim Stanley was not a flashy member of the Memphis Mafia. He was Elvis's personal accountant for a few years in the late 60s and early 70s, a period that overlapped significantly with the dates. In the journal, he was known for his discretion and meticulousness. After Elvis's death, he seemed to vanish from the public eye, avoiding interviews and staying out of the spotlight. Amelia found an old address for Jim Stanley in a small town outside Nashville. She made an appointment, explaining her research, carefully omitting the more sensitive details of the prayer list itself. Jim Stanley was a man in his late 80s now, frail but with remarkably sharp, intelligent eyes. He lived in a modest house, surrounded by books and the quiet hum of a life well lived. When Amelia showed him the journal and the cryptic Jess's entries, a knowing, almost wistful smile touched his lips. "King's secrets," he murmured, his voice soft as if speaking to himself. "I always wondered if anyone would ever find out. You were his accountant, Mr. Stanley?" Amelia asked. "For a time, but more than that, I was his confidant. Not about the women or the drugs, mind you. Those were other people's business. My business was his good heart. He trusted me implicitly." "He tasked you with handling these anonymous donations?" Amelia asked, gesturing to the journal entries. "He had a profound belief in tithing, in giving back. But he also believed that true charity was done in secret. Don't let your left hand know. He didn't want glory for it. He wanted the act to be pure, untainted by public scrutiny, or expatriant. He wanted to help purely and simply because it was the right thing to do. He funded Mrs. Gable's family, helped Elijah Jones, saved Maria Sanchez's clinic, supported William Thompson's community center." Amelia listed, feeling a thrill of confirmation. Jim Stanley's eyes sparkled. "Make sure no one knows it came from me." "How did you keep it a secret for so long?" Amelia asked, fascinated. "Careful planning," Jim explained. "Layers of inaridia, ire. He was different ariases. Muse. He used different alias. He knew the public could be cynical. He knew the media would sensationalize it, turn it interested in that. He just wanted to alleviate suffering, to give hope. And he always added them to his prayer list. He believed that prayer was as powerful as any monetary gift." Jim paused, a faraway look in his eyes. "You know, people often saw Elvis as wild, extravagant, larger than life. In his quiet moments, he was one of the most humble, compassionate, and spiritual men I've ever known. This list, this journal, they are the truest testament to who he really was." Amelia felt an overwhelming wave of emotion. Her journey had not only revealed hidden stories, but had connected her to a man who had dedicated his life to preserving Elvis's most sacred secrets. She wasn't just finding facts. She was uncovering the very soul of the king. This encounter with Jim Stanley solidified everything, providing the missing link in the chain of quiet miracles. The next name on the list now felt less like a puzzle and more like a door waiting to be opened, revealing another facet of Elvis's extraordinary hidden legacy. Armed with Jim Stanley's confirmation, Amelia felt a profound shift in her understanding of Elvis. He wasn't just a generous celebrity. He was a strategic, deeply spiritual humanitarian who operated in the shadows. The prayer list was a testament to his values, and Amelia felt a sacred duty to honor that. She returned to the list, her eyes falling on the next name. Arthur "Art" Sterling. This name immediately sent a jolt of surprise through her. Arthur Sterling was a legendary country music singer, a contemporary of Elvis, and often seen by the public and media as a quiet, unspoken rival in the music world. While never directly antagonistic, the two represented different facets of American music, and their fan bases often saw them in a kind of gentle competition. Why would Elvis pray for him? Amelia delved into the archives for any connection between Elvis and Arthur Sterling. She found nothing in official records suggesting a friendship or collaboration. They had performed at some of the same venues, even shared a bill once or twice in the early days, but there was no public interaction of note. The media never reported them socializing. This was a truly surprise, unlikely given the nature of the list. Was there a secret rivalry that manifested in spiritual concern? Amelia doubted it. The prayer list was too pure for that. She started researching Arthur Sterling's life, looking for periods of personal struggle or hardship. Arthur Sterling had a long, successful career, but, like many artists, he had faced his share of private battles. Amelia discovered a challenging period in the late 1960s. Sterling had lost his wife Eleanor to a long illness, and shortly after, his only child, a daughter, had died in a tragic accident. He had spiraled into a deep depression, canceling tours and withdrawing from public life for almost 2 years. The media had reported it, of course, with a degree of respectful sympathy. Could Elvis have been praying for him during that specific dark time? It fit the pattern of anonymous compassion, but how would Elvis, consumed by his own fame and demanding schedule, know the depth of Sterling's private despair and then act on it? Amelia searched for any connection between Elvis and Sterling during that period. Nothing direct, no letters, no phone calls. She felt a familiar frustration setting in. This secret was more deeply buried than the others. Then she remembered something Jim Stanley had said. He had a sixth sense for need. He'd hear a story, read a letter, or sometimes just meet someone briefly, and he'd know. Amelia went back to the archives, looking for any reports of Elvis in the same city as Arthur Sterling during that specific period of mourning. It was a long shot, but she found it. Tiny note in a fan club newsletter from 1968, mentioning Elvis had made an unscheduled, very brief stop in a small Tennessee town during a cross-country drive. It was reported he had pulled over at a roadside diner for a late-night meal. That town, Amelia discovered, was very close to where Arthur Sterling had retreated to a secluded farm after his tragedies. It was a flimsy lead, a single fleeting moment, but Amelia's gut told her it was significant. It was still there. A classic, unpretentious American diner called The Crossroads. Amelia decided to make another road trip. The Crossroads diner was exactly as depicted in the old photos. Red pine booths, a long counter, a jukebox in the corner. An elderly woman, Martha, with a kindly face and quick wit, had owned and operated it for over 50 years. He's on Elvis's private prayer list, Amelia explained. I'm trying to understand why. Martha nodded slowly, her gaze drifting to a framed, faded photo on the wall of Elvis. Looking young and vibrant. Elvis stopped by here once, late at night, maybe 68, 69, just after his comeback special. I think he was on his way somewhere. Looking tired, trying to be inconspicuous, sat right there, and a slice of pie. That night, Arthur Sterling was also here, Martha continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Came here often during that time. He was living up the road, hiding from the world. He was in a bad way. Dear Broken just sat at the counter, nursing a cup of coffee, staring into space. He looked like a ghost. Did they speak? Amelia asked. Arthur didn't see Elvis, or pretended not to. He was too deep in his own sorrow. But Elvis, he saw Arthur. He kept glancing over, his eyes full of concern. You could just feel it, that empathy radiating from him. Don't tell him who said it. Just that. And maybe ask him to consider reaching out to his manager just one more time. Tell him it's never too late for a song to be heard." Martha paused, her eyes shimmering. "I gave Arthur the message. He just nodded, didn't say much, but a few weeks going back into the studio. Slowly, surely he came back, and he wrote some of his most beautiful, most soulful songs. After that, songs about loss, but also about hope and finding light." Amelia felt a profound sense of understanding. Instead, he had offered a message of quiet encouragement, a spark of hope at the lowest point of a perceived rival's life. He had recognized another artist suffering, and instead of competition, he felt profound compassion. He had used his unique insight, his understanding of the power of music, to whisper a message of resilience. "And he prayed for him," Amelia said, completing the thought. "He did," Martha confirmed. "He prayed for him. That's the Elvis I remember, not the king of rock and roll, but the king of hearts." The story was deeply moving. It wasn't about money or fame. It was about genuine human connection, about empathy that transcended public marginals and perceived rivalries. Elvis didn't just care for the unknown and the struggling. He extended his compassion even to those who might have been seen as competition, recognizing their shared humanity. Prayer List wasn't just a record of charity. It was a testament to his expansive, unconditional love. Amelia sat in her office, surrounded by the culmination of her research: the wooden box, the prayer list, the journal, and her own meticulous notes filled with the stories of Mrs. Gable, Elijah Jones, Maria Sanchez, William Thompson, and Arthur Sterling. Each story was a vibrant thread weaving together to form a powerful, undeniable portrait of Elvis Presley. The man, not just the legend. She had initially approached Mr. Davies with cautious optimism, presenting her findings piece by piece. To her surprise, his initial skepticism had slowly, steadily eroded. He listened intently to the stories, his professional detachment giving way to genuine awe. The details, the consistent pattern of anonymous, heartfelt giving, the deliberate secrecy, the confirmation from Jim Stanley. It was all too compelling to dismiss. "Amelia," Mr. Davies had said after hearing the story of Arthur Sterling, "this changes everything. We've always known Elvis was generous, but this depth, this quiet, did extraordinary." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a new respect. "What do you propose we do with this?" That question led to weeks of careful planning. Amelia suggested a small private exhibit, something intimate and respectful, to honor Elvis's wishes for anonymity, while still sharing the profound truth of his character. It wouldn't be a grand puppet display, at least not yet. Instead, it would be a special viewing for key Graceland staff, a few select researchers, and perhaps the surviving individuals from the prayer list. If they were willing and able, the day of the private unveiling arrived. The small, unassuming room in the Graceland archives, usually reserved for serious research, was transformed. The prayer list, framed reverently behind UV protective glass, was the centerpiece. Around it, Amelia had arranged carefully corridored artifacts. A photograph of Mrs. Gable's house with its blooming roses. A blurred image of blind Eli with his guitar. A newspaper clipping about the Beacon Community Center. A small vintage nurse's cap for Sterling's comeback album. Each display included a concise, respectful summary of the story, emphasizing Elvis's anonymity and profound compassion. No sensationalism, just the quiet power of his kindness. Amelia had even managed to arrange for Mrs. Gable, now frail but still sharp-minded, and Marcus Jones, blind Eli's grandson, to attend. Maria Sanchez was flying in, and a representative from the Beacon Center was present. The room filled slowly. Mr. Davies, Graceland's CEO, a few other senior archivists, and most importantly the individuals whose lives Elvis had secretly touched. A hushed silence fell as Amelia began her presentation. She started by explaining the discovery of the dusty box, the prayer list, and the initial confusion over the unfamiliar names. Then she began to tell the stories one by one, her voice filled with quiet passion. She spoke of Mrs. Gable's roses, of Blind Eli's guitar, of Maria Sanchez's brave heart, of William Thompson's vision for the beacon, and of Arthur Sterling's message. The room became thick with emotion. Tears flowed freely from the eyes of Mrs. Gable. Remembering the kindness that saved her home, Marcus Jones wiped a tear from his cheek. Finally, understanding the full extent of the secret light his grandfather had spoken of, Maria Sanchez, now a vibrant woman in her 60s, clutched her heart, reliving the whisper-sung lullabies that gave her strength. The representative from the Beacon spoke of how Elvis's quiet support had built generations of hope. When Amelia finished, the silence was deafening. No applause, no grand pronouncements. Just a collective understanding, a shared reverence for the man whose heart had been so much larger than his fame. Mr. Davies, his eyes red-rimmed, walked over to Amelia. "Amelia," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you haven't just uncovered a few stories, you've revealed the very soul of Elvis Presley. This is his truest legacy." Mrs. Gable walked slowly to Amelia, taking her hand. "He never forgot," she whispered. "And now, because of you, the world might finally see him as he truly was." Marcus Jones clasped Amelia's shoulder. "My grandfather would be proud. You've given voice to the silent songs of his heart." Amelia felt overwhelmed, yet profoundly fulfilled. This wasn't just about Elvis anymore. It was about the power of hidden kindness, the ripple effect of anonymous good deeds. It was about seeing beyond the superficial, finding the genuine humanity that often gets lost in the glare of celebrity. She looked at the prayer list, the names now imbued with such vivid, personal meaning. They were no longer just words on a page. They were living testaments to a man who, despite his unparalleled fame, remained connected to the struggles of ordinary people, and who, with silent prayers and secret acts, sought to lighten their burdens. The legacy of Elvis Presley, she realized, was far richer, far deeper, and infinitely more beautiful than anyone had ever known. The private unveiling of the prayer list stories marked a turning point, not just for Graceland, but for Amelia personally. The heartfelt gratitude from Mrs. Gable, Marcus Jones, Maria Sanchez, and the Beacon representatives was more rewarding than any public acclaim could have been. Mr. Davies, now a steadfast advocate, ensured that the exhibit, while still intimate, was shared with a wider circle of trusted historians and Elvis's closest family members. The impact was subtle but profound. Discussions about Elvis began to shift, moving beyond the well-worn narratives of his music, movies, and personal struggles. News outlets, having caught wind of the story through carefully managed leaks, with strict instructions to respect the initial anonymity of the beneficiaries, began to run pieces about the hidden heart of the king, focusing on his spatial depth. It wasn't sensationalism. It was a respectful reevaluation of his character. Amelia felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She had not only honored Elvis's desire for anonymity, but had also paradoxically revealed a more authentic, inspiring version of him to the world. She continued her work in the archives, but now every document seemed to glow with a new significance. She wasn't just cataloging history. She was uncovering humanity. One quiet afternoon months after the initial unveiling, Amelia was working in the archives. When Mr. Davies called her into his office, he had a small smile playing on his lips. "Amelia," he began, "you've done extraordinary work. Your dedication to uncovering the true Elvis has not gone unnoticed. The Graceland board, with my strong recommendation, had decided to create. We believe it's time the stories you've unearthed are too powerful, too inspiring to remain hidden forever. We will design it carefully, respectfully, preserving the dignity of those Elvis helped. But the world needs to know this side of him." Amelia felt a surge of elation. The prayer list, once a dusty secret, would become a public testament to Elvis's deepest values. "There's something else," Mr. Davies continued, a twinkle in his eye. "We've had a few more inquiries since the news started to spread. Other individuals, people who heard the stories and recognized patterns of similar unassuming in their own lives, now suspect Elvis might have been their secret benefactor." Amelia felt a thrill of discovery. The list, it seemed, was just the beginning. Elvis's acts of kindness extended far beyond the names he had painstakingly written down. One day, as the new exhibit was being designed, Amelia received a package. It contained a single wilted rose, pressed flat and carefully preserved, along with a handwritten note. It was from Mrs. Gable. "Dear Amelia." The note read, in a trembling hand, "My roses are blooming beautifully this year, fuller and more vibrant than ever. It's like they know their story is being told. Thank you for making sure Elvis's prayers were answered, not just for us." Amelia held the pressed rose, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. It wasn't just a flower. It was a symbol of hope, of resilience, and of the quiet, enduring power of human connection. A few weeks later, Marcus Jones performed a special concert at a Memphis church dedicated to blind Eli and the anonymous patron who had changed his family's destiny. He spoke movingly of Elvis's secret generosity, sharing his own story for the first time publicly. The concert ended with a soulful rendition of "Can't Help Falling in Love," played on a guitar reminiscent of the Gibson L5 his grandfather had received. The entire audience, moved by the revelation, rose for a standing ovation. Maria Sanchez, now a revered nurse in her community, visited Graceland for the public opening of the Prayer List exhibit. She stood before her story, tears in her eyes, and spoke to a small group of visitors. "Elvis Presley didn't just sing to me," she said, her voice clear and strong. "He gave me the chance to live, to heal, to help others. He taught me that kindness, even unspoken, is the greatest miracle." Amelia watched, her heart full. She realized that her journey, which had started with a single dust-covered box, had become something much larger. It wasn't just about the archives of the legacy of a famous man. It was about the universal truth that the most powerful acts of love and compassion are often the ones done in silence, without expectation of reward. The surprising names on Elvis's prayer list were no longer just names. They were living testaments to a man whose heart was as boundless as his talent, a man who, despite his struggles, used his gifts to uplift and empower. His prayers, hidden for so long, had finally been answered, not just for those on the list, but for everyone who would now know the true, unassuming, and profoundly heartwarming legacy of Elvis Presley, the King of Hearts.